years, there's been such a, a dip in sales productivity. And now it's starting to come back around. So, but what's happening is we're starting to do the coffees in person. We're starting to get out there. You get out there once, and then maybe the next follow-up is via Zoom, but you've already established that connection because you met with them once.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Leads to Growth. I'm your host, Chris McCoy with the National Association of Sales Professionals, and very excited to have a big player in her arena and a big player in the global arena, someone who's got a big hand in doing a lot of the things that are going on in the world today because of the industry she's in and just what an impact she's had on this industry. Anna Frazzetto, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much. I am so looking forward to the conversation, Chris.
Awesome. And so you got to love when you get a referral podcast guest with such high stature as this one. Anna is the CRO of Core One right now. But when I said she had such an impact on her industry, Core One is in the recruiting and staffing industry, right? And Anna's been named as a top 50 DE&I influencer, as diversity, equity, and inclusion influencer in the U.S. and Canada, and has also been recognized by the staffing industry agency as a global 150 power woman for the last 4 years. And it's funny when you ask, you receive, and we've been asking for some powerful women of sales, and her sales career is extensive as well. So Anna, thank you for gracing us with your presence. I got a lot of topics I'm excited to talk to you about.
Thank you so much. I'm truly humbled by that introduction.
Oh, awesome. Well, that's how she comes in. She comes in humble. So, we've got a good guest. Well, and I'm going to get right into it. We've got a great audience of sales professionals out there. And a lot of them are looking to advance their career. A lot of them are looking to, move forward in the next position. And my experiences with recruiters has always been, I don't know when they're coming or when they're not coming, is that they show up sometimes. What's the relationship with somebody who wants to advance their career and seeking out recruiters, or how much of your business is just the other way around?
So that is such a great point, actually. Chris, it's amazing to me because when you go to school, college fairs, and you're trying to figure out where your career is going to start, the staffing industry is not well represented as far as potentially going to, work directly for the staffing industry. And that's something that I'm hoping, we could all kind of change and raise awareness out there. But I would say if you're, a young, exuberant, business professional that is interested in sales, right? That might possibly be a topic of interest. I would strongly suggest to get into the staffing industry and I would start in the recruitment side first. Because I think what happens is when you get your roots there, you truly understand the business, and then you truly have an appreciation for what does it take to find qualified candidates for your clients. And then when you move to the sales cycle where you're dealing directly with the client, you have such a great appreciation and you can really articulate what the full process is.
That's great. I was thinking about it too, because if you think about what an important buying decision it is in somebody's life, oftentimes, when you're getting them, it's a transition time in their life, right? Like we buy cars, we buy houses, but that career move is somewhere between these two other just buying decisions and maybe a wife or something like that. These are some of the most important decisions you make. And so I was thinking about how some of the best salespeople and also the most influential on the job market and the arena of what's going on out there are those who are in the staffing and recruiting agencies. And it's just, it's kind of like this little hidden gem. And the other piece that I was talking about as well is how much you represent brands and how valuable that is. I mean, I've gone through and interviewed at companies before and had a complete different experience from that company, from a recruiter who approached me from that company, and how important it is to find somebody who will represent us well when they're out there selling for us.
Exactly, because at the end of the day, people buy from people, right? So, but you want that relationship, that connection, that it exudes the company you represent, right? So anytime I'm speaking on anything, I want everybody to realize, oh, Anna is synonymous with Core One, right? And vice versa. It's the same thing with the recruiters. You want them to create this excitement around being associated with that company. And therefore, you're right, from a company perspective, you want to make sure that you select appropriately where you have people that will properly represent you.
Absolutely. I love it. And the other thing I noticed about our was it Laura, our other conversation, because there's so many different positions in and around this industry, you can be in the industry and serve so many different roles for years and have a really a 360 degree and understanding of the industry itself, which gives you so much value when you stick around. You get the diversity and the variety to be able to try different things, but you build a repertoire in an industry influencer leader like yourself. And if you look at your career, you could see that you've played different roles in and around this industry. How much has that valued your where you're at today and taking on this new role?
Oh, tremendous. Absolutely. I think, when I graduated, I was on the technical side of things. So I was a developer, programmer. That's how I started my career. So I was math and computer science major, polar opposite of, sales and staffing, right?
Sure.
So as I progressed in my career, I got involved where I started working for a staffing company that really started off as a small consulting company, but then they evolved into doing staffing and consulting, and then it got acquired by another company. And it started broadening my spectrum because of my technical background. I was able to get into technical sales support. I was then able to work with the recruiters and help them as they're teching and vetting out candidates, like questions to ask and, work with them. Then I was able to work with sales in better understanding the technology. I've always been in the IT side of things. So better for them to understand how, if a client asks for, ABC skills, two of them might be, polar opposite. So to be, like wise enough to be able to ask the question back to the client, because a lot of times clients will ask for a laundry list of things, right? And they want one person to have all of it. It's human nature. If you think about it, like when you're shopping for something, I want, like you're shopping for a car, you mentioned, I want all of these features. But then when you get to the reality of the situation, you might say, well, you know what, I probably don't need that. And I don't need this. And this is probably more.
How much do they want per year? What?
Right. Yeah.
All
Exactly.
right. We'll change our mind. I love that because you in and around these roles, as you heard, she was the recruited herself. She was the IT person. Then she did that for an industry service provider in the recruiting industry, in the staffing industry. Then she worked sales in a staffing company. Then she could have worked HR on the buying side, right, on the other side of the playground as well. And all of these different perspectives with so much variety, still staying in such a let's be honest, such a recession-proof industry. And it really is something that's kind of a little under the radar, so to speak, sometimes. And I think it's just such a valuable asset. I mean, you also so much responsible for the diversity and inclusion of major workforces across the country. I mean, they rely on y'all for that. I mean, that's a pretty interesting perspective, isn't it?
It is. And I love that, the fact that we can make a change, one step at a time. I used to have a consulting manager that reported into me years ago. And when we would talk about big consulting projects, and sometimes it would be overwhelming, and we would look at it and she would say, how do you eat an elephant? Just one small, nugget at a time. And that's exactly how I feel about, how can we make a change? If we all do our small part, it will make a significant change and it will change the future. When you look at some of the stats and it says it's going to, BLS talks about that it's going to take 126 years for there to be, gender pay equality. That's insane, that it
is.
to be that many years. But again, if we all do our own small part, we can probably improve those numbers.
Absolutely. And it's it's interesting that as salespeople, building relationships is everything, right? And
Right.
in this industry, they outsource those relationships to you, to your organizations, right? And then now, question: Do they request high diversity? Do you get that from the employers often? Is it we would like? Do you get specific requests as far as breakdowns of exactly the diversity they're looking for, or is that left amongst you to choose?
No, so I have not seen that it gets, specific. I actually think maybe that might be an HR issue if they like specifically say what they wanted. But I have definitely been part of the conversations where they're saying, help us. We want to diversify our, management team. We don't know how to go about
Mm.
doing it. A lot of times when those things happen, I have to say it's like people hire according to their likeness, right? Like you have a tendency to do that.
It's
And
subconscious bias. I mean, you're not
it is.
consciously this way. It's just subconscious. Our minds are built this way.
Right. And then what'll happen is that sometimes you'll actually wind up creating more of the issue a challenge. You refer to subconscious bias. I speak so much about gender equality, diversity issues. It's my passion. I'm constantly talking about it. And I'll give you an example. I'm waiting in an airport. They make an announcement and they said, we're waiting for the flight, the last flight attendant to make it to the gate before we can board the plane. Waiting. And now the flight attendant shows up. In my mind, I had already assumed it was a woman that we were looking for. And then sure enough, it was this young, gentleman that comes down. I said, my God, I'm doing exactly what I talk about. Like this is like, so how do we change that? It's like our brain gets wired a certain way and we have to undo that so that we can objectively look at things.
And I think you said the most brilliant thing is you said, oh, I did that. And I think that's the key. It's that awareness. Anthony DeMello wrote a book called Awareness. And one of the things he says in there is what you're aware of, you can control. What you're unaware of controls you. And I think that awareness becomes beautiful because you don't have to like, I mean, then there's the whole, like the idea of this whole white privilege and white guilt, right? Oh, just because you're aware of it doesn't mean that you now have to be guilty or angry with it. No, just the awareness that the bias exists is a way to start changing it. And I think having these conversations is something that you've been very involved in. It's having the conversation of diversity, having the conversation of, and the stats speak for themselves, which is kind of crazy too. Like if you look at an all one, all alike executive team versus a diverse executive team, it's almost like 30% the diverse will be more successful. I mean, it's very high, isn't it?
Right, it is. It is. I mean, there are studies out there that show that productivity and efficiencies increase exponentially if you have a diverse team. It's, it's diversity of thought. That's what happens. You wind up, if you have, 5 people that all went to the same school, graduated the same year, all played the same sport, all look alike, that's going to have one particular perspective. But if you now throw into the mix a variety of other talent, guess what? They broaden their perspective from like 30% vision to 100%. Right.
Absolutely. It's such an advantage now, considering how businesses are crossing borders and borders don't even exist anymore. And your market is so, put together that to have those opportunities to catch mistakes, to catch single form of thought. Nobody wants that anymore. That doesn't help you evolve. Disruption is where we're at right now. And it's just a very interesting world that we live in with this. Now, how much of your staffing and recruiting, how much does that take place in the sales world? Yeah,
So
for salespeople.
for sales, actually, minimal.
Right.
Most of our staffing, we are in the IT, finance and accounting, scientific, and engineering.
Yeah.
So space. So those are the types of people that we're recruiting for and, placing. So rarely do we engage with our clients that they're looking for for us to supply, salespeople. But what winds up happening is a lot of times with my network, if somebody comes to me and say, hey, I'm looking for a salesperson, I'm like, oh, hang on a second, I'm sure I can
Sure.
find somebody in your area.
And I asked the question just because I think it brings up a very interesting concept that why are salespeople not on that list? Can we name the people that you listed? It was
IT,
right? High degree,
finance,
high level of knowledge.
right,
Finance,
finance and accounting,
degree, high level of knowledge.
scientific,
Scientific degree, high level of knowledge.
and engineering.
And engineering degrees and high level of knowledge. It's a very interesting concept that our salespeople are not put into that place, right? And it's not a wrong thing of anything or a right thing. It's just interesting. It's kind of how we viewed salespeople in the past. That's the person who's got the gift of gab. They don't even have any education or anything like that, and they're a dime a dozen. We can replace them anytime. Like it's a very and because that's the way we think, that's often the way what we get in the sales world is a high turnover, high, revolving door in the sales world, which is I just think an interesting thought.
Right. Well, I think what challenges the sales industry in particular is that a lot of times the thought process is, well, it's on the job training. Like you expect him to come in and be successful. Now I have to say in the staffing world, our salespeople, like they go through training program, but most organizations don't have training program that they go through. They expect the salesperson to, come in and basically learn whatever they're selling. And then, okay, here's the list of people that you can call and try to sell those products or services to. So I think that's what creates also the turnover in sales. Also, I think it's as a salesperson, you're trying to figure out like, what do you really want to be selling?
This is true. I just find it so fascinating how both you and Laura's careers went as salespeople were in and around this industry. And I also find people that move within an industry from different roles. Like if I started off in science or IT and then I moved to sales, having that diversity. So like if I were recruiting or staffing in sales, I would go for people within the same industry, which that company is recruiting, that are not sales specific, because the sales skills that you need nowadays are far different than what you needed in the past. And I think a lot of people chose careers in a certain area and they're like, oh, maybe I could be good at sales. I can talk to people and I'm very knowledgeable and I'm a good listener. But those weren't the skills that we're hiring for sales 30 years ago. Knowledgeable and good listener, like that. Listening wasn't a top skill on the salesperson's chart back then. And so I just think I think there's a tremendous advantage for people shifting. A lot of people are moving to sales. A lot of them are coming from the retail sales industry right now. And as a person hiring, I talk to a lot of people as well. And I say, look for sales skills and personality traits within your organization. And I think you can find somebody who's got a history in your industry and that knowledge and that understanding of the other side of the table. Wow, that's so valuable.
It is, because if you think about it, the sales role is a strategic role in the sense that they need to understand their buyer, right? You can't just, there used to be a sales leader in the industry, Jeffrey Gitmer, who would always, when he would do training, he would say, you show up and throw up, right? That brand new salesperson, so excited about the company that they work for. They're talking to a client. You only have a half an hour for the meeting. So therefore, I got to make sure I get my full spiel in. And you go there and you're like, and this is what we do. And the person on the other end is like, oh, it's a staffing person. Okay, you need to speak to HR, right? And you kind of, you miss the window of opportunity to establish that relationship maybe at a higher level within the organization. It's a strategic, you need to understand your buyer and not show up and throw up.
Yeah, I mean, just experience in the corporate world, allows you to move through that multiple buyer process so much easier. So let's talk about the staffing industry. I find it very interesting that it is kind of recession proof, isn't it? I mean, you're always going to be moving people from one place to the other. I mean, so that industry is not really, I mean, you guys don't see much up and down, do you?
Yeah, so I love that you say that it's recession proof, because I think what winds up happening though is it does change the model of how people want talent. So, you know, if you're in a great economy, companies are growing, they're doing direct hire. They want to hire and build and add more people, right? As you start tightening things, what'll happen is they'll say, okay, I'm not going to do direct hire anymore. I'm now going to focus more on a contracting base type of staffing. So it does, and contracting provides flexibility, right?
Sure.
So that's the thing that, you know, if a company, you know, take a look at some of the big companies out there, because they're so big and they have so many employees, they're the first ones that you start seeing that they let go 1,000 people, they let go, you know, 700 people, and you start getting those types of announcements. But they're the large organizations that have so much labor that the quickest way to reduce cost is by cutting down your labor force.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So it kind of ebbs and flows a little bit more. Now, how often do y'all do anything working with the hiring managers, the interviewers? I found, and listen, I'm not in the industry and I'm not in HR as well, so put that out there. But I haven't seen, and I'm pretty out there, but I may well have missed it. Is there a lot of training for hiring? A lot of training for, I mean, because as we said, we have these subconscious biases, and I'll raise my hand. I've consulted with some companies before, and I was put in charge of hiring, and I hadn't had any experience in the past, and I found myself going into an interview having already brought in my decision. You know, like I was like, that's very interesting. Like I already have an opinion on this person. They haven't even walked in the room yet. Then they walk in a room and I either confirm or deny my opinion in the moment. And I'm listening to my biases, and I was like, wow, what? And then you start to figure out, what questions am I asking? And I realized that most of my questions were only validating my own knowledge. They weren't seeking an outside set of experience or knowledge or a different perspective. And I really discovered a lot in my process, but I don't know if everybody goes through that inner monologue and growth in that experience. Do you train people to hire better?
So it winds up happening, not as a formal training, but actually it winds up evolving as you have the relationships with the clients that are looking to hire. Because if you think about it, when we're looking to place someone, you start asking, the questions of, okay, well, how long has this position been open? What are the nice to haves versus need to have in the role? And you start helping them, especially when they don't have a job description. That happens a lot. And they're like, oh, can you help me? And you actually start crafting the job description for them. By doing that, you're gathering, it's almost like you're interviewing the client, and then that's helping you to formulate the questions that need to be asked. We pass that knowledge right back to the client, because when the client is getting prepped for the new candidate that you're putting forward, you then say, well, these are the kinds of questions that we've been asking the candidates. And it winds up, you are training them in an indirect way. But I agree to your original point. There definitely is a need in that space to get better at it, because if not, you're just going to keep creating like the same over and over again.
Right. And I think it's very interesting, because you go in there and like, what are my outcomes in hiring this person? Like you go in there with roles and responsibilities, but then you think, well, what is a value system? What's their perspective on things? I want them to have a different perspective than me now, because now I'm like, well, I don't want somebody to see things the same as I do. Then we're going to miss things, and so you start to really understand a lot more about what it is that you're looking for that's just outside of a roles and responsibilities sheet, in a resume.
Right.
And how to get those things out in a way where you're not milking them for the right answer, or you're not planting it, or you're also not, but you're getting an authentic response from that. I think it's a very, there's a lot more nuances than I think most people take advantage of. And I think there's a lot to be learned in that area. And it's a huge advantage for somebody who's a good interviewer and knows really what they want and what's going to help the company and the department. Huge advantage.
Oh, exactly. And I mean, I think this is where behavioral interviewing comes into play, right?
Yes.
So that it's not, sometimes we find that some people are very, checklists, like, oh, they know .NET, they know that, like you're kind of going through down the checklist, and that's not really giving you a proper perspective of the individual.
Yeah, I can get that on the resume. right?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
you're right. So tell me more about behavioral interviewing.
So I love behavioral interviewing because what happens is you pose a situation to who you're interviewing,
Mm,
and then you ask them how they would handle it. So what happens is it kind of also eliminates the pre-canned, rehearsed,
sure.
answers that you have, right? Because now they're kind of thinking on the spot because they're not aware of whatever situation I might be, proposing. And
I like
sometimes it
that.
could be as simple as saying, if it's a manager role, so you have a team and you just found out that you have to reduce the team by, 30%. How do you message that to the team? So they have to think on the
Mhm.
fly. It wouldn't be something that would be rehearsed. And that'll give you true insight into the individual, as opposed to what the resume says and, meeting your checklist of questions.
Very interesting. Yeah, that's if you're right, it puts them in a creative mode. They have to create a decision or an idea, a perspective, a
Right,
belief, or whatever in that moment, as opposed to going off an old reference that they brought
right.
in. Very nice. Oh, I'll have a drink too. That's nice. We had a great interview with a gentleman named Oscar Trimboli, and Oscar teaches listening,
Oh,
and at a very high level, Silicon Valley, I think Microsoft, Google, et cetera, et cetera. And he teaches it for sales. And he's
mm,
just an exceptional human being. And one of the things he talked about was bringing in a glass of water, bringing in water, and always making sure the person that you're interviewing or talking to or selling has water as well. It's a way to mirror. It's also a way to drinking water helps release certain endorphins. It's a whole process. It's a
mm.
scientific, but also a mirroring process that you both can connect with on the water and the pause and
Right.
interrupting things. So it's very interesting. Um, so Anna, tell me more about if I'm in sales, and what's the sales, what is the industry like in recruiting and staffing for salespeople to because it's a lucrative industry. Recruiting is. I know that. I'm not sure as much about staffing, but I would imagine so as well. So if I'm in sales in some industry, I'm maybe doing retail, or I'm doing a small B2B sales, maybe some SaaS, and I'm like, SaaS, and I'm like, I've got a gift of building relationships. I think I want to look into the recruiting industry. What kind of advice do you have for people?
Well, of course, considering that I've spent most of my career in this space, I'm very passionate about it. I think it's a great industry to be in. It, it's, you have such a window of opportunity as far as earning. That's another thing. Some industries cap sales commissions, right?
Hmm.
Some industries do that. We don't. Right.
Mm,
So you can literally, like, we always want to push and strive for, like, don't you want to become $1 million rep? And it's
mm,
very doable in this field, in this arena. It's a lot of hard work. You are in control of your destiny, right? Because you're building your funnel and you're managing to that. So it's all a matter of what you put into it. That's what you're going to get in return. But as far as lucrative, absolutely. I think it's a great field to be in. I think the best way to start is to try the recruitment side first, because it gives you a true picture of the industry. And then, 3, 6 months in, you move into the sales role. I think that is like magical when you do that, because then it all comes together, and then you're out there rocking and rolling.
I love that. So what does a day in the life look like for a person in a sales role in your industry?
So usually first thing in the morning, it's kind of regroup as far as any action items that you had the night before. And then you look at your target list. As a recruiter, usually we have huddle meetings every morning, and we talk, like, each recruiter has three potential new Rex to go after. My computer was about to reboot, so I'm trying to make
Oh, we
sure.
just
I'm like,
caught it. Nice.
what just happened there? Yeah. So, like, for the recruiters, when we do the huddle, it's like, what are the top three Recs that you're going to work on today? Right. So they have a number one, number two, number three, and then it's like finding candidates for each of those Recs. And then the recruiters are off and running. From a sales perspective, it's what three, new opportunities are you kind of going after? And that's where you're either using tools like LinkedIn, or you are actually calling into different accounts, but you try to figure out how you can break into the account. Again, it's strategy. And then at the end of the day, you usually regroup and say, okay, this worked well. I still need to go after these open recs, and this is how I'm going to tackle it the next day. The weeks fly by because it is a very fast-paced industry.
And you are selling to both sides, right? You're selling to the
Yeah,
client to represent them, and then you're selling to the people to bring them together with the client, the
exactly.
individuals. So I think it's such a powerful place to be, because you really are, look, it's basically get out there, know people, and be the one that they want to work with, because people are always going to be hiring. It's just whether they're thinking about you or you're on top of mind or not. And someone's always going to be looking for a job, or thinking about looking for a job, right? And it's, well, whether you catch them with the right eye, get the right open, or have the right relationship. And it is all sales relationships and all skills, all relationship building.
It is. And you hit the nail on the head when you said being top of mind. That's one of the key, success factors in sales, is how do you stay top of mind with your clients? Clients, you could tell a client, how many of us have gone through this where, we're having a meeting and now it's a follow-up meeting, and you say, yeah, I'm in the IT space, and they go, oh, really? I didn't know you were in the IT space. You do that too. And you're like, oh my goodness, I've had like how many meetings with them? Because you constantly have to remind them and stay top of mind. And what's the old expression that you got to tell somebody 7 times for it to actually stick, right? So you got to tell them 7 times to keep it top of mind.
100%. It's so true. In our minds, as we talk about, we process so much information. Only so much of it is valuable to us in the moment, right? And so some of that information you drop, you lose it at sleep, you lose it in the moment, you don't hear it.
Right.
Who's not multitasking 99% of the day now? It's ridiculous.
Right.
And so as you do this, you can only accept so much information. And so that when the information is not valuable in the moment, you let it go. So if you hear it 4 or 5 times, it doesn't matter. You're not going to receive it or hold on to it until it is a valuable moment for you. So as a salesperson, and the graceful salesperson knows how to do it in a way where you don't feel like you're being pestered and them selling you every day. This is the key. And I think we talk a lot about it in email communication, social, LinkedIn, you mentioned as well. It's called engagement. It's the same way you would build a relationship with somebody at a networking event. You don't say, hey, do you want to buy something? 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 No, you don't. Just know how you work. You talk to people, you build a relationship. You see, first off, if they want to engage with you. All right, call to engage. Then you get a call to reply. Did they open my email? And until they open my email, I'm not asking for a meeting, right? Once they've opened my email, then I'll ask for a reply. Once I get a reply, then I'll ask if they're interested. Then I'll ask if they'd like to have a meeting. It's a dance.
It is a dance. And you know what? I think, unfortunately, social media has given the false perception that you can shrink the dance into, like 2 steps, right? You can't. So that's the part that's so difficult, is the fact that you're constantly trying to say, slow down.
Yeah.
You need to, establish the relationship. If the relationship is not established, like you said, to just say, oh, buy from, buy from me. I get so many messages bombarded on LinkedIn that I actually just ignore, because
Yeah.
show up and throw up. Just
Yeah.
like, woo, are you interested in my product? It does this. Like, no, you don't even know anything about me.
You nailed it. Social media has made us believe that we can shrink this period of time it takes to build a relationship with somebody into one message.
Right.
And it's, wow, it's very interesting. And you can see it socially, in the way men and women have leveraged videos and cameras, together, and it's everywhere. But you're right, the internet and the social media has really changed our perspective in the way that it takes to build a relationship. And it's not conscious all the time. It's subconscious, but you just have to be aware. You have to be aware how you're being perceived, how you're being heard. Read your own emails, read your own messages. Would you reply?
Right. So now you bring an interesting point, Chris. the pandemic, right? And
Mhm.
everybody was kind of moved into, we're doing video, we're doing Zoom, we're doing, that kind of, relationship. And if you notice, sales suffered
Yes.
through this process. So why did it suffer? Because it was taking the relationship part out, right?
Yeah.
Now, what happens is I'm meeting somebody for the first time. I can't connect, right? Because I'm not in the office and I'm not saying, oh, look at that. Oh, wow, you golf. Or wow, you like to fish. Or really, when did you go, hiking? Or I see, hiking trail maps. And you start connecting. You could talk about different things. That's out the window with the Zoom call, right? Because now it's like you're in front of me and it's like, hi, okay, you wanted this meeting, and then
And
you have to cut to the chase.
yeah, and it's I almost interrupted you, so sorry about that. Yeah, no, but you have me so excited, but you're so true because we don't have that little walk from the front desk to their office anymore to have that small talk, to have that interruption of my last meeting, right? Oh, would you like a cup of coffee? Let me grab a cup of coffee. It's that
Right.
that in between. Now it's no, my last Zoom ended at 11:30 and my next one starts at 11:30. And it's we don't interrupt our own patterns, we don't break our own patterns of
Right.
thought, nor does the other person.
Right. And it becomes very business,
Mm-hmm.
becomes very transactional.
Mm-hmm.
So, right. So you take the relay, and that's why, I mean, the 2 years, there's been such a, a dip in sales productivity. And now it's starting to come back around. So, but what's happening is we're starting to do the coffees in person. We're
Yeah,
starting to get out there. You get out there once, and then maybe the next follow-up is via Zoom, but you've already established that connection because you met with them once. So, and that's the
absolutely.
way that we can get, more, better at the sales process.
Yeah, and I can't remember his name, but it was the CEO of Microsoft, I believe, said, our second year, 2021, through the pandemic, he said, we went through 2 years of digital transformation in 2 months.
Yeah.
And when that happens, we're all figuring it out. We're all learning. We didn't know how to communicate. And people were just learning how to communicate in person, let alone now having to bring that to a two-dimensional thing on Zoom, without body language, without any of the other elements, and then also how our need for connection just was so low, like our own personal stress levels and everything else. And
Right.
so when you bring all those factors together, yeah, it really makes a lot of sense. And I think as we look to the future, I think we're going to have to find ways to blend these worlds together, and to find a nice balance, and learn also that if you have a Zoom call with somebody, learn how to develop rapport. Like when we have a model we call the communication hierarchy, and it starts with certainty. You always have to deliver certainty first before I can move on to significance. Then I bring significance. All right, great. Listen, we both agreed to meet here for these reasons, right? And listen, you're obviously the one to meet with. You're excellent at what you do, and you're the decision maker. You'll lead this conversation, but I just want to get a couple things out of the way. Now I go to team. Listen, we're only here to play however you need us to play, and we can play more if we need to, less if we need to, but we're here to support you.
Right.
You're the one who's going to win on this. Then we get to strategy. But what happens is you get, like you said, you get that 15 minutes and it's a Zoom call. Like, well, let me get the strategy really quick so I can let them know what we do. And they don't even hear you. They still thinking about the last meeting they got out of. You didn't give them
Right.
any certainty in this conversation. You did not make them feel special. Your conversation is over.
Yeah.
And then you're right. We forgot those pieces.
Yeah, it's like we forgot. It's like when you look at an email and you just have the body of the email and you didn't have any salutations or greetings or anything, and you're just gonna jump right in. Like we need to kind of go back to basics.
Yeah, I agree. Now, are you guys doing a lot of update and training in how to build relationships in Zoom? Like for your salespeople, you guys seem to be very good on your sales team. Are you guys doing a lot of sales training for them ongoing?
Yeah, we do have an ongoing sales training program, and and we also talk about like different objections and how they come in, right? Because some of it are objections just because of the whole Zoom setup or Microsoft Teams, but
Yeah.
yeah, and try to navigate around that. It's been a learning process even for the clients because nobody wants to be on video calls from 8 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock at night and going from transaction to transaction.
Mm-mm.
and it does create unnecessary, fatigue. So it's
Burnout.
a matter of how do you help break the cycle even for the client.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
hey, before we get started, how's your day going? What's going on? Get them to talk about something else.
This goes such a long way. And here's another tip, I think. Schedule a phone call after you've had a Zoom call. Oh, it's such an amazing thing to have a phone call meeting. You're like, wait, I don't have to sit in front of this screen the whole time. Like I could actually like walk around, or like a phone call is a tremendous blessing now. And you're like, oh, it'll just be a phone call. Like, oh, it's so great. I don't have to put my makeup on or whatever.
I know it's so true because you're like, oh my God, I have freedom. I have my AirPods in. I can go downstairs and get a cup of coffee.
Yeah, I agree. I think really leveraging these, and like you said, taking the time to say, hey, how are you? How's your week been? It's Friday, right? Whew. Like sometimes these little pieces, they go a long way. I think I just email going out in our newsletter on Monday. It's a cold email reference, but the tip is context over content. And like, yeah, tell me why you're reaching out. Tell me why we're having this conversation. Let's look at the forest a little bit instead of just jumping into the trees right away. And
Right.
that really brings people to you, and it brings you to them where they're at. And I think it's a really special thing.
Right. No, that's good. That's
Yeah.
perfect.
Well, Anna, listen, I could talk to you all day. You're amazing. Really, honestly, when you read the title of being an influencer in this arena, just a lot of thanks and gratitude. The world is a better place when people push those barriers. And like you said, if we don't all make a conscious effort in doing so, nothing ever gets done. We end up on that 2020, 34, 50, whatever plan. And so any way we can continue to push this barrier and bring amazing women onto this podcast, we'd be honored. Where can our amazing saleswomen follow you?
Oh, so on LinkedIn, it's Anna Frazzetto, and obviously they can email me if they'd like at Anna F as in Frank at core1, and core is with the K, KORE1.com.
I love it. And listen, for all you hiring managers out there, sales leaders out there, executives out there, if you need some more expansion in the diversity inclusion, you need someone to help you with this process, reach out to Anna. I'm sure she's got some great advice and support for you. And it makes sense in the bottom line, y'all. Come on. All right, Anna, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chris. Have a great day.
Hey, I will. All right, y'all. That's Leads to Growth. We're the National Association of Sales Professionals. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Give all those stars for us down there. And we'll see you on the next one. Thank y'all. Cheers.